G'day folks, welcome to another scenario from The Greatest Day, Saw, Juno and Gold Beaches by Adam Starkweather. This time I'm doing Storming Juno, Introductory Scenario 2, which focuses, of course, on the Canadians at Juno Beach, mainly the 7th and the 8th Brigades of that 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. Let's jump into it. Okay, so here we are with the setup for Storming Juno, this introductory scenario 2. And before I get things started, I want to look over the map. Something I probably didn't do in enough detail with that first introductory scenario. So Juno Beach focuses around Courcelles-sur-Mer, Bernier-sur-Mer, and over on the right, Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer. The victory conditions are that the Canadians, this is the 3rd Canadian Division now, we can see their divisional chart over here. They start off with that troop quality of -1 until they clear the beach. Focusing on the 7th Canadian Brigade and the 8th Canadian Brigade on the right here. Their primary task is to clear Juno Beach, again by the 11 AM turn, exit 4 units of the commandos off the map, and then have at least 12 command points on that 3rd Division displayed. If they fail to do so, then the Germans will win. Now, looking over the gaps, you can see gap here, gap, gap. I've set up the German minefields pretty much right in front of the gaps this time. I did make some slight variations last time I played it, which was a bit pointless, a bit silly, but this time just very direct. As soon as they pass through that gap, those minefields will be there to stop them. Once again, we have these marshes in the middle. I do need to be more mindful of those, although none of them are in front of a gap. Yes, these might be city hexes, which give the unarmored defenders a -3 modifier in defense and give armored defenders a -2 modifier. So they're going to be very tough to hold. Does Bernier-sur-Mer count as a city as well? Yes, just looking at it, just to distinguish between village, town, and actual city. That's very interesting. Looking at the Widerstandes as well. So 0 step, 0 step. That should be nice to get rid of those in the first naval chit. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. So in the Allies' favour is the relatively weaker Widerstand nests starting on the map. But we have, just off screen here, quite a few German reinforcements and this artillery park, which will set up fairly early once the scenario gets started. So the Germans, I think, will have some key decisions to make when they come on the board, when their reinforcements arrive. The Allies, my thinking is, again, having never played this before, is that they really need to rush, try and capture Courcelles, Bernier-sur-Mer before those Germans can really set up a tough defence. Because as I saw, as you may have seen if you watched the last video, I'm not great yet at cracking those entrenched defences. I'm still struggling to coordinate my artillery and my assaults and range fire and so forth. Still learning. Again, this is still an introductory learning scenario, but again, I'm learning a lot, picking up a lot of things as I go along. A lot of open ground behind these, so again, I think once the Allies can secure a bit of a foothold, they'll have a lot of open ground, impassable terrain here. So marshes. So they're really going to be split. The 7th Canadians coming this way, and then the 8th Canadians pushing out to the right there, Bernier and Saint-Aubin. And then, of course, supported by the 2nd Canadian Armour, these DDs throughout the beaches. I still, again, am unsure. They're attached to the division, so they're part of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, but I'm not sure how to use those armoured units, if I should sort of stack them with the infantry or focus them all in one area and try and drive through. Again, if you've played this and you've got any advice for me, let me know. Happy to take on board any constructive feedback, suggestions, comments, and so forth. And again, we start with this naval chit. This will be the first thing drawn. That'll be the first thing that I do. I'll report back soon. Well, here we have the pretty disastrous results of that first naval chit. The DD flotillas and support craft can only really target from this is their viewing point here, a few of the Wittgenstein nests. This one's out of sight, this is out of sight. And I think the one on the far right here is out of sight as well. So there's this one, and this one that they can target. And even then, sorry, they did eliminate one in the center here, a 0-step unit, but all they could do was put on some light barrages on the other. They got lucky with a heavy here, but then that was it. And because of that, all these other Wittgenstein, this one here, 31 out on the left of Courcelles, could see all these Canadians from the 7th Brigade as they're coming into land. And you can see cohesion hits, step losses down there, cohesion, more cohesion hits, there's a step loss under here, and I think this is some more cohesion hits, a step loss. It's just terrible. These guys drifted, they rolled at 0 for obstacles, these guys rolled at 0 for obstacles, so cohesion, it's just disastrous first few moments for the Allies at Juno Beach here. Nothing going their way. One Wittgenstein nest, a 0-step unit wiped out. They do have the nests down to 1 at least, so that's sort of starting to reduce the impact of some of that nest fire. But it's really, at the moment, it's the obstacles that have been hurting them. These obstacle rolls causing the step losses. And causing a lot of pain for the Canadians. We'll see how they go over the coming moments. Okay, so here's the situation after the 3rd Canadian Division chit and the next naval chit. So Canadians have had a lot of follow-up to their initial landings. And as you can see, the situation has much improved. By having those few units on the beach, they had line of sight to this Wittgenstein nest here, and then this one over here. So they were able to try to get these ships, the DD flotillas, in command by rolling 6 or less, which they did on every occasion. This place not only placed these units under barrage, but inflicted a cohesion hit, and over here 2 cohesion hits and a suppression. Over here 2 cohesion and a suppression. These are on 1-step Wittgenstein nest, so they are 1 hit away from being removed. So yeah, looking pretty good, and we still have these brigade activations to go. So if we can draw these Canadian activations, brigade activations, over the coming counter draw or 2, it would be looking, suddenly turning things around for the Canadians. They do, however, need to get these gaps down. Gaps are currently on 5, they can't do much. So maybe they want, anyway, they need to get those gaps down before they can do anything. Yes. So they're now landing safely. Obstacles 0, nests 0, defenders are blinded. The adjacent defenders are now both suppressed, so they can't really opportunity fire. The Canadians right now are free to move. My understanding is they're free to move. Well, they can't move through gaps, that's the biggest barrier, but they can otherwise move up the beaches quite freely. Do need to watch out for these marshes here. I do have some armoured units in this area. I want to make sure I don't make the same mistake. But they'll be able to move up right adjacent to these gaps, and maybe even attack the gaps first, open some spaces, and then follow through with some subsequent movements. Let's see what happens. Well, what difference a few activations make. Let me show you the order of the activations. So we had direct command, then we had the 8th and the 7th Canadians activated, and it was these 2 activations here where the 2 Canadian brigades focused on their engineers to reduce the gaps to 0, which opened up just, actually the Germans opened the first one way out here, and then the other two gap reductions happened here. So we've got a gap here and here. It's unfortunate they're side by side, but that's where the engineers just happen to be reducing the gaps from. When the 7th Brigade activated, they were then able to move through these gaps. So the 8th, I think, reduced the gaps. No, maybe I'm wrong there. They reduced some of the gaps. They were able to reduce it to 3, sorry. And then the 7th reduced it to 2, 1, 0. And this is when the gaps started to open. And some units were then able to move through these gaps, get into column, take immediate advantage of that, and get into the minefields. The Germans attempted to counterattack. They spent a few command points to counter. The lines are still open, so they're still in command, I think. They can still do that. Then the Royal Marines were activated. Now they can't move through their gap way out on the right, but they could attack that Wittgenstein nest, and they were able to eliminate it. Remember, it only needed 1 hit to be eliminated, which I have to say, it took them some time, but they eventually did it. And finally, this is what's happened on the last activation for the turn. Same as in my last scenario. This is the remaining Cup, 7/16th Division, so they don't get to activate. Their reinforcements don't arrive this turn. It's amazing, the luck, the swing of luck that the Canadians have had here. So the 2nd Canadian Armoured Brigade activated. They had armoured units all along the beach. They all pretty much, all from here, got into column and drove through those gaps, through that gap there, through this gap here, triggering some opportunity fire along the way, suffering a few cohesion hits. You probably can't see, but just under these columns, there is a cohesion hit. So they did suffer some cohesion hits along the way, but they have burst through the beaches, surrounded Corsair, and on their way to Bernier-sur-Mer, just stopped by movement allowances because of this this heavy barrage marker. But they have, locked down Corsair. I don't know how to pronounce that. Corsair, out on the left-hand side of this map here, surrounded it, secured it. The next time the naval chit is drawn, all those gaps will be open. They now have line of sight to all these Wittgenstein nests in this area, including that 0 step, which wasn't attacked because the other thing they've been doing, of course, Canadians have really been burning through their command points, and they're down to 0. This is exactly what I did in the last scenario, and I said I'd learnt my lesson, but I hadn't. I just really wanted to reduce these markers down, and the sooner I could think you get these nests and obstacles and gaps down, the sooner you can get off the beach. And then now I'm going to start recovering those command points, playing a bit more cautiously. But right now, the Canadians have really broken open this situation. They've swarmed in. These are all armoured units, of course, of that 2nd Canadian Armoured Brigade. Here we are, under Wyman. And they're just able to use these roads so effectively out of the line of sight because all these units are under a barrage marker. And when they are in line of sight, when they're adjacent, they just suffer a bit of opportunity fire. So that is now, with 1 chit left in the cup, this will be the first chit drawn on next turn. And this is when these German reinforcements will arrive and find themselves locked out of the city. Wow. Let's see how things develop. Okay, so one small correction. I realise that these hexes here, the roads don't link up, so those armoured units couldn't move through the city between these hexes. They have to follow the road. So I immediately fixed that up and moved these units back. And then the Germans came on the board, and they really couldn't do much. As they tried to kind of move into the city, they suffered opportunity fire, and they lost a few units, and then Krug just decided to hold here. On the left here, they did get some infantry up. The Canadian armoured units failed a lot of the opportunity fire around here, so they could occupy, I think they're in a little village here. That may be a village, or it's a town, sorry, slightly more defendable. And And then, again, you have this series of allied actions. The naval chit was pretty inconsequential, just a couple of barrage markers being placed. 3 of the units failed their spotting roles. Then the 7th Canadian Brigade just brought up some infantry up through this area, suffered some set losses as they tried to move up, because of course they're now in the line of sight, and some of the Germans can now respond to opportunity fire, and they did some damage. And then the division activation came out, and actually, sorry, way back at the direct command, I think that's when the Canadian Armoured, 2nd Canadian Armoured decided to assault that Wittgenstein nest. That was successful, but they haven't been too successful against these 2 here, which still hold out. And in fact, there's still 2. That should not be an allied marker. That should be, just to make it clear, it's still a German. Oh no, wait. Yeah, I think this is a German Wittgenstein nest in there, and another one just next to it here. A 2-stepper, still holding quite strong. The reason being that the last chit in the cup was the 8th Canadian Brigade, so they'll be the first out, and hopefully they'll be able to clear. They're really going to put a lot of effort focusing on that Wittgenstein nest. There's 2 Wittgenstein nests. Fortunately, to the right, the commandos have crossed through the gap into the minefield. They've had to stop, but they're about to leave, so that's one of the objectives. The Allies really need to clear the beach, clear those Wittgenstein nests, and again, keep in mind 3 hexes from those beaches includes this hex here. 1, 2, 3, yeah, so they need to be careful that they clear the whole area. They kind of were on track last turn. They've slowed down this turn due to a lot of poor rolls. So that's the end of the 9 AM turn. We're about to head into the final 11 AM turn. Okay, well here's the situation in the 11 AM turn, and in this scenario, it's another German victory for various reasons. First of all, I mentioned earlier the commandos moved onto here, and they were just waiting for the engineers to clear that mine, but the engineers weren't able to activate in time, and so the commandos needed to basically roll to leave that minefield, and 3 of them failed their troop quality check, so only 3 commandos made it off instead of the 4. So that's the tertiary task failed. Now, because the 8th Canadian Brigade didn't activate on that second turn, they were 1 activation short, and they were never able to get off the beach. So there's a whole heap of units here stuck on the beach. They did spend that last turn clearing out that last Wittgenstein nest, and I made a mistake. This wasn't a Wittgenstein nest. This is one of the 7th 16th Division reinforcements that quickly rushed down that road to occupy a position. And they managed to clear them out, occupy the area, clear the city hexes around here, but they're still lagging on the beach at 11 AM. And because of that failure, the 7th Canadian Brigade over here didn't really press these 2 Wittgenstein nests. A couple of little back and forth fire exchanges, but the Canadians started to relax a little, realising they weren't going to win the scenario. And again, a lot of units on the beach. They did manage to get their command points back up. They're sitting on 13 command points, 1 more than they need for their secondary objective. So they've completed their secondary task, but they haven't opened the beach, and they didn't get those commandos off, and they are technically the victory conditions. Again, this doesn't really, victory conditions designed here to kind of drive your actions. This is reflecting what you want to do. You want to clear the beach. You want to demonstrate you can get commandos off and so forth. The primary intent here is to learn how the situation works and what you're meant to do. And again, I'm still doing a lot of things wrong. Learning as I go, but I keep forgetting to flip the drift markers. That's pretty critical. I kind of play catch up with that when I realise I've forgotten to do it. one thing I am doing, I keep forgetting, is you can only have 1 unit in column per hex, and I often make the mistake there. So I have to remember that 1 unit in column per hex. It's a simple rule. Just as you're trying to rush units through these gaps, they have to do so one at a time. What else am I forgetting? Or what am I learning? Certainly doing using these independent units. These are kind of considered at the start of every formation activation. And my understanding is they can basically, if there's multiple formation activations, they can basically be activated with each activation that they're in range up to the activation, well, within the activation range of the brigade commanders and up to their activation number. So if in effect 6 independent units within range of 8. So I'm using those much more effectively to get some sort of mortar fire on, some anti-tank fire and so forth. Getting some of the big tanks out here. I don't know what they are. Yeah, kind of assault guns up against the Widerstand nests. Found it very hard to crack these two. They were just -2 defenses in a city, which has another -2 modifier, if I'm doing that right. -3, additional -2 for the city. That's -5. It means that anybody shooting at them needs a 0 to hit. And that's why they have 2 cohesion hits, because I managed to roll 2 zeros. But it's just a case of piling up those cohesion hits and hoping to get 3 such that they suffer a step loss. 1 step there, 1 step there, and then so they're 1 hit away from being eliminated each. It did feel good to break, as the allies, to break through. I really focus on reducing those nests and obstacles and then gaps. I think that's roughly the order I should have done it. Would have been nice to open a gap a little bit earlier. Would have been able to help me get some units off the beaches. But when that happened, those armoured units really raced through those gaps and secured some of those key roads around here. That all happened pretty early, and then I kind of squandered that advantage. I just needed to kind of stop, turn around, focus on those Widerstand nests, and I didn't. I got distracted by these other German reinforcements coming on. What else? The absence of really naval support. These are all the naval guns that the Canadians get at here. 3 DD flotillas and 2 support craft and 2 rockets. It hinders their ability to silence the defenders. And you saw on that, I think on the second turn, how the failure for those flotillas to get radio support, radio contact, meant that there was a lot of unbarraged units. If you're wondering why there's a lack of barrage markers in this last turn, it's because the last chip in the cut was the naval chit. So that came out early. We could have barraged these units, maybe caused a hit or so. Almost certainly. With 5 ships shooting, I must have been able to get something decent. So certainly this is a scenario where the swings, you really feel the swings of the chit draws and what does and doesn't come out. The Germans felt it in the first turn when the 7/16 didn't come out. The Canadians felt it in the second when their armoured brigade didn't come out. And then they felt it again in the third when their naval chit didn't come out. But again, it's not a super competitive scenario. It's really designed just to run you through the motions. So that is the Storming Juno scenario, introductory scenario 2 from the 7th to 11th of June 1944. Hope you've enjoyed it.